The morning sky over the Celestial Empire looked normal, but everything was about to change forever. Emperor Jin sat in his golden palace, signing a piece of paper that would shock the entire world. He called it Decree 47, and it said something no one could believe. Every woman in his empire had to die within 7 days. Jin's reason sounded crazy to everyone else. He claimed women were making his empire weak and impure. His advisors tried to stop him, but the emperor wouldn't listen. He thought killing all women would make his kingdom stronger and better. How wrong he was. The first place they struck was the capital city's main square. Soldiers arrived at dawn with trucks and weapons, forcing women from their homes. Mothers holding babies, grandmothers walking with canes, teenage girls heading to school. None were spared. The sight was horrifying. Dr. Mina was one of the first victims. She worked at the children's hospital, spending her life trying to cure sick kids. When soldiers came to her lab, she was testing a new medicine for childhood cancer. She begged them to let her finish her work, to save the children waiting for her help, but they dragged her away anyway. The emperor wanted the whole world to see what he was doing. Television cameras filmed everything as Dr. Mina was brought to the execution platform. She looked directly into the camera and spoke her last words. "I was trying to save children. Now who will help them?" Then the unthinkable happened and the broadcast went dark. Within minutes, the footage spread everywhere. People in houses, offices, and schools watched in complete shock. Mothers hugged their daughters tighter. Fathers called their wives to make sure they were safe. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Wu was an engineer working on building bridges. When he saw his wife Hai being dragged from their home, he tried to fight the soldiers. They knocked him down and took her anyway. That night, he made a video from his empty house. His voice shook as he spoke. "They've taken my wife, my sister, my mother. They think removing women will make them strong, but they've just signed their own death sentence." The executions continued all week. Teacher Yoon was killed while protecting her young daughter Cho. Both died together, their hands still holding each other. Construction worker Tae lost his pregnant wife minutes before she was about to give birth. Artist Hana was painting a beautiful landscape when soldiers burst in. They destroyed her painting too, saying art made people soft. Each death was filmed and shown around the world. The images were too painful to watch, but too important to ignore. News anchors cried while reporting. World leaders called emergency meetings. Protests began in every major city as people demanded action. By the third day, the empire had killed 1 million women. By the 5th day, it was 2 million. The soldiers were tired, but Emperor Jin pushed them harder. He celebrated each death as a victory, not knowing he was creating millions of enemies. In other countries, men grieved for women they'd never met. General Ari, who had escaped the empire just in time, started making phone calls to military leaders everywhere. "We can't let this continue," she said. "If we don't stop this madness, we're next." The world watched as the empire's own women tried to hide. Some dressed as men. Others fled to mountains and forests. But the emperor's soldiers searched. Everywhere they used dogs, helicopters, and thermal cameras. Nowhere was safe. International news teams tried to enter the empire to report the truth. Most were turned away or arrested. A few managed to sneak in and filmed secret footage of the massacres. These videos made the world even angrier. Religious leaders prayed, but many lost faith. How could such evil exist? Teachers tried explaining current events to children but didn't know how. The whole world felt helpless watching the horror unfold day after day. By the 7th day, the empire was eerily quiet. The streets that once bustled with families now had only men and children. Empty houses stood as monuments to destroyed families. The hospital where Dr. Mina worked closed because most doctors were gone. Schools shut down because teachers were murdered. Emperor Jin stood on his palace balcony looking over his empire. He expected to feel victorious, but something felt wrong. The silence was too deep, the emptiness too complete. He had created exactly what he wanted. A world without women. Now he had to live in it. That night, while the emperor slept, the first International ship appeared on the horizon. Then another. Soon, warships from dozens of countries surrounded the Empire's coasts. The world had seen enough. The men who lost their wives, mothers, and daughters were coming for revenge. The week of horror was over, but the war was just beginning. The world had watched 1 week of unimaginable horror. 7 days of mothers being torn from their children. 7 days of sisters disappearing forever. 7 days of daughters who would never come home. Now it was time for the consequences Emperor Jin never imagined would come. Wu sat in his empty house, staring at his wife Hai's favorite chair. She used to read there every evening after work. Her book still lay open on the side table, a bookmark showing she was halfway through chapter 12. She'd never finish it now. Something broke inside Wu that night. He picked up his camera and started recording. "My name is Wu," he began, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his eyes. "My wife was killed 5 days ago. My sister too. My mother barely escaped to the mountains and I don't know if she's alive." He held up a photo of Hai smiling at their wedding. "The Emperor thinks removing women makes men stronger. He's about to learn how wrong he is. We're coming for you, Jin, and we're bringing friends." Wu posted the video online. Within an hour it had 10,000 views. Within 6 hours, 10 million. Men from every corner of the earth shared it, adding their own stories of loss. The Yar video became the battle cry of a brewing war. In the neighboring kingdom, Dr. Mina's brother worked as a surgeon. He'd saved thousands of lives over the years, believing in the sacred duty to heal. But when he saw footage of his sister's execution, everything changed. He recorded his own message. "Mina spent her life saving children. She was working on a cure for cancer when they killed her. The Emperor doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as those he murdered." Captain Tay commanded a naval base in the south. His pregnant wife had been killed, along with their unborn child. The night after her death, he gathered his crew on deck. These were men who'd served together for years, through storms and battles. Now they had a different kind of war to fight. "Listen carefully," Tay told his sailors. "Our wives, our daughters, our mothers, they're gone. The man responsible sits in his palace celebrating. But empires fall when they forget that power comes from the people. And the people want justice." His ship was the first to head toward the Celestial Empire. Others followed. The Western Navy, Eastern Fleet, Northern Armada, all converging on one target. The Emperor had awakened something he couldn't control. General Ari had escaped the Empire just hours before the executions began. She'd been visiting family when she heard about Decree 47. Her quick thinking saved her life, but her heart died, watching her homeland destroy itself. Now she used her military knowledge for revenge. She called every contact she had in armies worldwide. "I know their defenses," she told each leader. "I know their weaknesses. Give me soldiers, and I'll give you victory." Within days, she had promises from 47 nations. An alliance was forming unlike anything in history. Meanwhile, inside the Empire, something unexpected happened. The Emperor's own soldiers started questioning orders. Many had lost wives and daughters too. Commander Min, a loyal officer for 20 years, finally reached his breaking point when he found his teenage daughter's diary. The last entry read, "The soldiers came today. Dad was away. Mom held my hand tight. She whispered that Daddy would be okay, that he'd understand we had to die for the Empire. I don't understand. I'm scared. I hope Dad knows I love him." Min crumpled the diary and walked to the palace. He found Emperor Jin in his throne room, planning more executions of escaped women. "Your Majesty," Min said quietly, "I resign." He dropped his sword at the Emperor's feet and walked away. Dozens of other officers followed. The executions had created something the Emperor never expected: unity among enemies. Countries that had fought for centuries put aside their differences. Old rivals became allies overnight. The shared horror of watching women die had created the strongest military alliance in human history. Religious leaders who rarely agreed on anything issued joint statements. "This is not war," they declared. This is justice. When half of humanity is murdered, the other half must respond. Churches, mosques, temples, and synagogues all prayed for the same thing: victory over evil. College professor Ho had lost his wife and 3 daughters. He was a peaceful man who taught literature and poetry, but loss changed him. He began secretly training with weapons, something he'd never imagined doing. My pen wrote poems, he told his students. Now my sword will write justice. The emperor watched international news with growing concern. Protests filled streets worldwide. Leaders denounced him in every language. Economic sanctions hit his empire hard. But Jin's pride blinded him to the real threat forming at his borders. They won't dare attack, he told his advisors. They're too weak without their women. His general tried to warn him about the massive military buildup, but Jin laughed. Let them come. We'll show them how strong men fight. He had no idea that strength born from love and loss was far more powerful than anything his cruelty could create. The spark had become a flame. Soon it would become an inferno that would consume everything he'd built. The world was no longer watching. Now it was moving. Ships sailed through dark waters. Planes filled the skies. Soldiers cleaned their weapons and thought of empty houses back home. The reckoning was coming, and Emperor Jin had lit the fuse himself. The 4th night after the massacres changed everything. While Emperor Jin slept in his golden palace, a secret meeting was happening far away in the capital city of a neighboring country. General Ari hadn't slept since escaping the empire. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her mind stayed sharp. She'd seen her homeland destroy itself, and now she was planning its salvation. The meeting room was crowded with faces both familiar and surprising. Presidents who usually hated each other sat side by side. Military leaders who'd fought wars against each other now shared the same goal. Admiral Quan, the famous ocean warrior, sat next to Colonel Shin from the Mountain Kingdom. Even King Ho, ruler of the peaceful northern lands, had come personally. We all saw what happened, General, Ari began, her voice cutting through the tension. 3 million women died in 1 week. Mothers, daughters, sisters, gone forever because one man decided they weren't worthy of life. She stood before a giant map of the empire. I know every road, every military base, every secret passage. I can help you win. Admiral Quan spoke. Next. His wife had been visiting the empire when the killings started. She died on the 3rd day. My fleet has 700 ships, he said quietly. All captains volunteer to fight. They've seen their own wives and daughters cry for strangers. We're ready. Representatives from 47 nations raised their hands, pledging support. The eastern counties promised their air force. The Western Federation offered ground troops. The Southern Alliance brought engineers and medical teams. Even tiny island nations sent what they could: boats, supplies, and brave hearts. But this wasn't just about military might. Dr. Tay, who'd fled the empire with surgical tools hidden in his clothes, brought devastating news. The empire's medical system is failing, he explained. They killed 80% of nurses and doctors. Hospitals are closing. People are dying from simple diseases because there's no one left to treat them. Engineer Ho had more shocking information. The empire ran on women's work more than they admitted. Most teachers were women, many computer programmers too, half the farmers. Now schools are closing, technology is failing, and food isn't being planted. The emperor didn't just commit murder. He destroyed his own country. The coalition realized they weren't just fighting a military battle. The empire was already collapsing, from within. Their job was to push it over the edge and make sure justice was served. Queen Mina from the island nation stood up. She was young but wise, having ruled since 18 when her parents died. I lost my sister to this madness, she said. She was visiting the empire as our ambassador. They killed her even though she carried diplomatic papers. This isn't just war anymore. It's a promise to every woman who died that their deaths won't be forgotten. The planning began immediately. The coalition named itself the Emergency Alliance for Human Preservation. General Ari became the supreme commander, leading armies from dozens of nations. Admiral Quan took charge of naval operations. Air Marshal Wu, whose wife had been Dr. Mina, controlled all aircraft. They divided into 3 strike teams. The Northern Force would attack mountain bases. The Southern Fleet would control the seas. The Central Army would march straight toward the capital. But they all had one goal: reach Emperor Jin and bring him to justice. Intelligence Officer Jai had spent years studying the Empire's weaknesses. She'd barely escaped when the killings began, leaving her sisters behind. Now she shared crucial secrets. The Emperor's personal guard is shrinking, she revealed. Many soldiers deserted after killing their own family members. Morale is at its lowest point in history. The coalition leaders worked day and night. They shared resources, strategies, and pain. General Ari noticed something beautiful happening. Countries that had been enemies for centuries were now brothers in arms. The shared horror had erased old hatreds and created new friendships. Commander Cho reported from inside the Empire. He'd stayed behind to lead a resistance movement. "Thousands of people are waiting for your attack," he transmitted through secret radios. "Women who survived are hiding in forests and caves. Men who refused to participate in murders are joining rebel groups. The Empire is rotting from inside." The coalition also set up refugee camps for survivors. Nurse Hai, who'd secretly escaped the Empire by swimming across the border river, helped organize medical care. "We're seeing women with terrible injuries," she reported. "Some pretended to be dead to survive. Others hid in basements for weeks. They're traumatized but alive, and they want revenge as much as you do." International support poured in from every corner of the world. Protesters filled streets in every major city demanding action. Sports stars donated millions. Celebrities used their fame to spread awareness. Even children painted pictures supporting the coalition. The Empire's few remaining allies began abandoning them. Small kingdoms that had traded with the Empire closed their borders. Even the Emperor's oldest partner nation declared neutrality, refusing to help. Emperor Jin tried to seem strong in public, but spies reported he barely slept anymore. His own bodyguards whispered about surrender. Palace servants revealed that the Emperor paced his halls at night, jumping at shadows. The coalition grew stronger each day while the Empire weakened. Within 2 weeks, the Emergency Alliance commanded the largest combined military force in history. Ships filled the oceans. Planes darkened the skies. Soldiers from different nations trained together, united by common purpose. General Ari stood before her assembled commanders on the final planning day. "We fight not for conquest, but for justice," she declared. "We remember every face, every name, every story. Tomorrow, when we strike, we carry their spirits with us. The Emperor wanted to end women. Instead, he'll create his own ending." The coalition was ready. 47 nations, millions of soldiers, and the weight of justice itself prepared to settle the score. The clock struck 5 a.m. when the first explosions lit up the Empire's coast. Admiral Quan watched from his flagship as rockets screamed through the dark sky. These weren't random attacks. This was surgical precision. 47 nations had spent weeks planning every detail, and now their plan unfolded like a deadly dance. The Empire's radar systems detected the incoming threats, but it was too late. The first wave of attacks destroyed communication towers, military bases, and naval ports. Within minutes, the Empire's ability to coordinate defense vanished. Emperor Jin woke to screaming sirens and flashing emergency lights, but his generals couldn't tell him what was happening. Captain Ho commanded a submarine that had been hiding underwater for days. His wife and daughter were among the executed, and their photos sat taped to his periscope. When the signal came to attack, he whispered their names before giving the order. "Fire everything." Torpedoes sliced through the water toward the Empire's largest battleship. The massive vessel that had protected the realm for decades disappeared in flames within seconds. On land, something unexpected happened. As coalition forces approached the borders, entire Empire divisions began surrendering. Colonel Wu, whose sister had been killed on day 2 of the massacres, led his regiment toward the enemy lines. But instead of bullets, white flags greeted them. The enemy soldiers threw down their weapons and begged to join the coalition. "We couldn't stop it. cried Lieutenant Min, an Empire officer whose wife had been executed. "We tried to protect our families, but the Emperor threatened to kill us too. Please let us fight with you against him." These defections spread like wildfire. Within hours, half the Empire's army had switched sides. General Ari coordinated the three-pronged attack from her command center. Maps covered every wall, showing real-time positions of friendly and enemy forces. But what amazed her most was how smoothly everything worked. Nations that had never cooperated before now moved as one unit. The Northern Force advanced through mountain passes. The Southern Fleet controlled all sea routes. The Central Army pushed toward the capital with surprising speed. Inside the capital, chaos ruled. Dr. Tay, who had returned secretly to help the resistance, coordinated with underground fighters. "The Emperor's forces are in complete disarray," he reported through hidden radio. "They can't communicate between units. Some are still following orders, but most just want to survive." The Empire's Air Force tried to mount a defense, but it was hopeless. Pilot after pilot reported the same thing. They were outnumbered 50-1. Master Shin, leading the coalition's air assault, had lost his daughter in the massacres. He flew her favorite plane with her photo painted on the nose. "This one's for you, little bird," he said, targeting the Emperor's personal aircraft hangar. What crushed the Empire's resistance wasn't just military might, it was the moral weight of their actions. Everywhere coalition forces went, they found allies. Women who had hidden in forests emerged to guide troops through secret paths. Men who had protected their sisters came forward with information about enemy positions. The Empire was betraying itself from within. Commander Joe discovered something shocking during a raid on a military base. "Most of their high-tech equipment isn't working," he radioed. "Turns out women ran most of their technical systems. Without them, their satellites are offline, their computers crash, and their weapons malfunction." The Empire had literally destroyed its own ability to wage war. By noon on the first day, coalition forces had advanced farther than anyone expected. The Empire's defensive lines collapsed one after another. Orders from the capital made no sense, because the Emperor's advisors couldn't understand what was happening. Panic spread through the palace as reports flooded in about victories they didn't want to admit. Engineer Quan found an abandoned Empire outpost where documents lay scattered everywhere. Reading them, his blood ran cold. The papers detailed plans, far worse than anyone imagined. They weren't stopping at women, he transmitted to headquarters. They had lists of children, elderly, and disabled people. The executions were just the beginning. This discovery fueled the coalition's fury even more. Soldiers who thought they'd already seen maximum evil now learned the true depth of the Emperor's madness. Units that had been advancing steadily now sprinted toward the capital, desperate to stop any future horrors. The Empire tried desperate tactics. They threatened to execute remaining prisoners if the coalition didn't retreat. But intercepted communications revealed they had no prisoners left. They'd already killed everyone they could catch. They tried to bomb their own cities to slow the advance, but their own people revolted, protecting coalition forces. Nurse Hai, treating wounded coalition soldiers, noticed something remarkable. "These aren't typical combat injuries," she reported. "Most wounds come from friendly fire, Empire soldiers shooting their own officers who ordered them to fight. The Empire was tearing itself apart faster than any outside force could destroy it. As the sun set on the first day, coalition forces had penetrated deep into Empire territory. The Emperor's communication with most of his military was completely cut off. Rebel groups controlled major cities. The magnificent empire that had seemed unbeatable 1 week ago was crumbling like a sandcastle hit by waves. The real war wasn't between armies. It was between justice and madness. And justice, powered by the memory of 3 million murdered women, was winning decisively. 3 months after the first bomb fell, everything had changed. The Celestial Empire lay in ruins, its golden palace cracked and empty. Wind blew through broken windows where emperors once planned their glory. But the silence inside those walls told a different story, a tale of madness that destroyed an entire civilization. Commander Shin found Emperor Jin in the deepest part of his underground bunker. The man who had ordered 3 million deaths sat, alone at a small wooden table, staring at a single photograph. It showed his own daughter, smiling on her wedding day. She had been visiting relatives when Decree 47 was issued. Following his own law, he had ordered her execution too. "I was trying to make us pure," Jin whispered when they found him. His voice shook like a child's. "I thought women made us weak, but now I see what I've done." Around him lay empty bottles and scattered papers. His own suicide note, written and rewritten dozens of times. He never got to finish it. The coalition leaders arrived at the palace to find Jin had taken his own life. General Ari stood in his throne room, looking at the golden chair where so much evil had been planned. "He destroyed everything his ancestors built," she said quietly. 500 years of history, gone because one man lost his mind. But victory came at a terrible price. The war had lasted only 3 months, but those months felt like decades. Millions more had died beyond the original victims. Cities lay in rubble. Farms were burned. Children wandered alone, looking for parents who would never come home. Dr. Tay worked in a makeshift hospital built from a destroyed school. Every day brought new horrors. "The living are harder to save than the dead," he told visiting reporters. "We see people who haven't spoken since their wives died, children who forgot how to smile, men who can't sleep because they hear their daughters calling for help." The Empire's infrastructure had completely collapsed. Engineer Ho tried to restore power to the capital, but found a shocking truth. The systems were so dependent on skilled workers that when those workers were killed, everything failed, he explained. Water treatment plants, power grids, communication networks, all run by people who were murdered. "We're essentially rebuilding from Stone Age level." Nurse Mina ran orphanages for children who'd lost everything. She'd survived by hiding in a basement for weeks, emerging only when coalition forces arrived. "We have thousands of children who don't remember their mothers' faces," she said, holding a crying boy named Jay. "This child hasn't spoken since his mother died. He just draws pictures of empty chairs." The psychological damage was deeper than anyone imagined. Dr. Kwan, studying the aftermath, discovered something frightening. Men who participated in the executions are suffering complete mental breakdowns, he reported. Many can't remember their own names. Others see their victims everywhere they look. The Emperor created a nation of traumatized souls. Some Empire territories were completely empty. Entire towns had been abandoned when all the women died and the men couldn't cope. Ghost houses lined empty streets, dinner still on tables, children's toys scattered in yards. These became monuments to madness, preserved exactly as they were when civilization collapsed. International aid poured in, but helping seemed impossible. Volunteer Hai from a neighboring country described the challenge. "How do you teach a man to cook when his wife always did it? How do you help a father raise his children when he doesn't know how?" The Empire didn't just lose half its people, it lost half its knowledge and skills. The coalition established temporary governments, but governing proved nearly impossible. Commander Joe discovered why. Every administrative office was empty. Female civil servants had run most government departments. School principals, tax collectors, city planners, gone. "We're trying to run a modern nation without anyone who knows how." Some tried to remember and honor the dead. Sculptor Wu spent months creating a memorial wall. 3 million names were carved in black stone, arranged by the date they died. People came from around the world to touch the names and cry. "We must never forget," Wu said, his own wife's name at eye level. "Never forget what happens when half of humanity is deemed worthless." The economic cost was staggering. The Empire had been wealthy and powerful. Now it couldn't feed its own people. Markets had collapsed when women stopped buying goods. Restaurants closed without female chefs and servers. Fashion districts became graveyards of empty shops. The gross domestic product dropped to almost zero. Children were perhaps the most tragic victims. Young Da, only 8 years old, asked every adult the same question. "When will Mama come home?" Nobody had the heart to explain that she never would. Schools tried to reopen, but how could they teach history to children who just lived through humanity's darkest chapter? General Ari stood at the Empire's border for the last time before leaving. Behind her lay ruins and graves. Ahead lay the long road to rebuilding. "We won the war," she said to reporters, "but I'm not sure anyone won anything. We stopped a madman, but the cost was everything." The world had learned a terrible lesson. When half of humanity is murdered, the survivors don't truly survive. They exist in a nightmare they can never escape. The price of Emperor Jin's madness wasn't just 3 million dead women. It was the death of an entire civilization, the destruction of millions of families, and scars that would remain for generations. In the end, the empire that tried to be strong by destroying women became the weakest place on Earth. The greatest. Madness was thinking that eliminating half of humanity would create anything but emptiness, sorrow, and ruin.